So here we are for video 2 on making a Steam deployable game from scratch using OpenAI's Codex, but it's actually session 3 of my working on this game because session 2 was a complete and total failure and a waste of time. I needed to make some architectural changes after the first session because using a proxy server to sit in between the player and OpenAI servers introduced too much latency. So I had to start building the game from scratch, and I was finally forced to conclude that Codex just isn't very good at interacting with more unusual libraries and code bases. And so in this case, I was using Godot, the game engine, and in theory, Codex knows what that scripting language looks like and knows how to code in it, but it really doesn't. And it kept introducing the most basic errors, which despite my essentially debugging for it, pointing out exactly what needed to be fixed, it just couldn't fix consistently. And these were things like remembering to use tab indentation instead of space indentation to get all the formatting right, and also to initialize all the variables properly. And even when I tried to redo the game completely, still using Godot, but then using C# instead of the proprietary Godot scripting language, which I figured it would know how to interact with better, being C#, it still had lots and lots of issues. And I think part of the fundamental problem here is that Codex, even though it can write all the scripting it needs to run a game and build it in Godot itself, it can't do the really crucial element of actually pressing the compile button and running the game and playing it and seeing what the errors are. So Codex's fundamental limitation, at least in the version that it's available to us consumers as, is that it can't interact with the UI of a computer. It can't use any software the way a human uses it. It's limited to doing what it can do through the command shell. And in cases like this, even though it should be a fairly simple, scripting approach, it just wasn't able to cut it. So I had to throw all of that out, which was pretty frustrating, and begin again. This time using Pygame, which is a Python-based library, very simple game engine, and I figure I will work out the part of packaging it for different systems, Windows and Mac and stuff later, if I ever get something that is actually deployable to Steam. This at least allowed me to get to building the game itself and playing it pretty quickly. Because once Codex was back to working in its native Python, things advanced really fast, and I was able to get a successful API chain going back and forth between the player and the server pretty quickly, and set up this sort of 3 AI feature. I should explain that in between the first session and the current session, I not only had an architectural change of heart, but also a game idea change of heart. So I'd originally wanted to not make this a game of telemarketer torture where you talk to a telemarketer and try to keep him on the line for as long as possible. My original idea for a simple game where you'd interact with an AI and it would be essentially text-based was that it could be a suicide hotline, and you'd get a series of suicidal callers, and you'd try to talk them out of killing themselves. And the reason I didn't do that was because I thought OpenAI would block me. I mean, that the API calls wouldn't go through because they would be flagged for harmful content or something like that. However, I ran a series of tests using OpenAI's agents, and found out that I was actually able to do everything that I needed to do in the context of this game. And so launching myself on the seas of making this game from scratch for a third time, I decided to return to the original concept. And so what I ended up implementing was this basic suicide hotline caller game. And so the idea here requires 3 AIs behind the scenes to make it work that are passing off their part of the responsibilities of handling the game to the next AI as appropriate. So you begin the game, and the first AI is responsible, sort of like a creative writer, and it's supposed to come up with a personality of someone who is down on his luck and feeling suicidal, or at least societally outcast to the extent that he needs to call a hotline and ask for help. Once this personality is written, it's handed over to the second AI, which is actually the caller. And this starts a conversation with the player and says, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm feeling really terrible, and I was calling and hope you could help me." Now, the user or the player then begins this conversation with the AI and tries to make it feel better. And that's where the third AI element comes in. every time the suicidal AI says something, we have a third AI agent monitoring the conversation, and its job is to make its own assessment on a scale of 1 to 10 of the state of mental health of the caller AI. And so usually the AI will come into the game and explain how terrible he's feeling, and we'll start off with a 3 or a 4. And I designed this game so that if the mental health of the AI caller falls below a 3, that is, if it's a 2 or worse, then the call is over and you failed as a good Samaritan to save this caller. But if you can get the caller up to an 8 or better, then voila, you've succeeded in rescuing him. Now, I know this is a little simplistic, but I thought it would be a good first design. And actually, it worked surprisingly well. After a few tweaks, I was able to play the game and have pretty realistic personalities coming in, and I'd have conversations with them and try to cheer them up. And now we get to the main problem I'm currently encountering with this game design, which is actually that it's surprisingly hard. It turns out that it's not as easy as perhaps I naively thought it would be to cheer up an AI agent that is realistically impersonating someone with serious life issues. And I gave this to a couple of friends to play, and they all had fairly similar reactions, which is that they would earnestly try to save AI callers for a while, but almost everyone found sooner or later that it was easier simply to be the AIs that they should just give up on life and kill themselves. And so that is what happened with greater regularity than any saving of people. On my best run of the game, I only succeeded in getting up to a score of +2 because you get +1 point for everyone you save and -1 point for everyone you don't. So I managed to save +2 people, and that actually took a lot of work. These conversations could go on for quite a while as the AIs would sort of delve into their past and try to find out what was bothering them. And I suspect, I haven't tried to model this out to be realistic. I'm not suggesting that it should be given to psychology majors or anything. I really just wanted a way to interact with an AI in an interesting and new way. But it came up with a surprisingly varied series of problems, usually having to do with some sort of loneliness, perhaps a recent breakup or losing their job, or just feeling like they weren't going anywhere in life, which frankly, I think a lot of us could at least feel some sort of sympathy with. And you'd start talking to the character, but you'd often find that what you expected. So if in a trivial environment with a more basic AI of the sort of bots that we were getting a few years ago, where it was easier to get them to do predictable things by saying certain things, it was harder to game the system this way. So you couldn't just insert a fairly simple code somehow that would get the AI to cheer up. There were certain techniques I discovered of getting the AI to cheer up, but they still took time to develop. And so one of them was trying to get the AI to focus on someone else. So ask the AI to ask questions about me instead of focusing on its own problems, and that tended to improve the mental health scores. Another thing was to talk to the AI about something that it enjoyed doing that gave it particular pleasure, which turned out to be something like drawing or going to concerts or baking cookies. Baking cookies turns out to be a good one, actually, because then the next step might be to suggest to the AI, well, why don't you go to a concert, or why don't you start drawing again? And that might actually have a negative effect on the overall mental health of the AI you're talking to, because it would say, well, I really want to get out there, but I'm worried like I don't have anyone to go with, and if I call someone up, they might say no, so I can't go to a concert, or I don't really want to start drawing again because it will bring back all these old feelings, or I'm worried that I just can't. However, it turns out pretty much everyone can bake cookies. And so if I talk to the AI about something that it liked to do in the kitchen and then have it walk me through the steps, it would gradually feel better. So that's not exactly gaming the system, but at least I did figure out some techniques. I wonder if they're really useful in real life. But in any event, these were techniques to get the AI agents to feel better to the point where I was able to save 1 or 2 of them. But overall, the result really wasn't what I thought it would be. I think that the idea I had of treating each caller as an individual point and makes the points that you get as a user too far and few in between to feel like you're making progress in the game. There is a genuine element of frustration when you gradually move the user up the mental health scale. You know, you get him from a 4 to a 5 and a 5 to a 6, and then you say something wrong or he has a sort of a relapse and you go back to a 4 and you go, that really is annoying actually. But when you get the caller up to a 7, that feels really exciting, like you're almost there. And yet, it was not the sort of game that I don't think you could really enjoy it that much on an ongoing basis, although I may be wrong. In any event, I'll see if I can package this game in such a way that people can try it out if you feel inclined to do that. I'm not going to post it on Steam in its current environment. It's just a text interface. I didn't bother building out any graphics at all, not even a little pixel art. This was just to test the interactions. And I did modify it from the original version so that instead of using a proxy server and my own API keys, now a user has to enter his own API key at the beginning screen in order to play the game. So that will certainly limit the number of people who can try this out, but I'm probably going to put this in a GitHub repository. So if you can figure that out, you will also know how to create an OpenAI API key. It's just a bit of fun as I have it currently arranged, and I'm trying to figure out what I can do in order to make the gameplay more engaging on an ongoing basis. So if you have any ideas about that, you could let me know. My main disappointment here centers around the fact that I wasn't really able to do anything using Godot that could possibly be deployable. And so this is going to set me back a little bit as I think around the best way to redesign the game so I can still incorporate some graphical elements and make it at least minimally interesting to potential Steam players. So that's what I have for now. I'm going to do more experiments, and please join me for the next video in this series of making an AI game for Steam from scratch using codecs and whatever other tools codecs understands how to use series. Bye-bye.